Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, after more than 2 decades of peace in Mozambique, why has violence and instability returned? Bilal is off this week, but filling in as our digital guest producer, May Al Hassan. Great to have you back in the stream, May. So our online community, they're looking out for our subject today. They're tweeting about it, about Mozambique. What are they saying about what's happening right now?
We have a lot of people on the ground and around the world who know about Mozambique and
Sure.
even know its history.
Wow.
Noni asks, is the election set to be a credible one? What's the progress with regard to peace talks? What's your opinion? Don't forget to tweet us throughout the show using the hashtag AJStream.
And you will hear more about that election in just a moment. But before we get to today's discussion, here's a look at some of the other Twitter hashtags that we're following at the stream. In Mozambique, more than 2 decades of peace is being threatened by renewed violence between the government and former rebels. Sporadic attacks between the opposition Renamo and the ruling party known as Frelimo have been on the rise, echoing the same divisions that fueled the country's 16-year civil war, which ended back in 1992. Separate factors contributing to instability include a wave of kidnappings and some violence in the lead up to Wednesday's municipal elections. Just on Saturday, 3 people were reportedly killed at a rally for an opposition political party. All of these tensions come at a time of economic growth for Mozambique, a country where development in coal and natural gas could make it one of Africa's largest energy producers. So, what's been done to ease tensions and prevent further violence in Mozambique? With us to talk about this, we have Eduardo Nambarate. He is a former Member of Parliament and the Secretary for International Affairs for Mozambique's main opposition party, known as Renamo. He's joining us via Skype from Maputo. Also in Maputo is Eric Sherez, an activist and the publisher of Verdade. That's a local newspaper in Mozambique. And we're also joined by Al Jazeera correspondent Haru Matassa, who's been following events on the ground in Beira, Mozambique. So Haru, Eduardo, Eric, it's great to have all of you here. But before we get started, I have to say that we reached out to Mozambique's Frelimo government to take part in today's discussion, but they turned down our request. So let's get started with Eduardo. Eduardo, you are part of Renamo, part of the opposition. I have spent years in Mozambique going backwards and forwards. If somebody told me that the peace agreement was at risk, there might be a risk of more conflict, I would think that they dropped on their head. What's gone on? Why are you back fighting with the government? What happened?
Well, I must start by clarifying that Renamo is fighting with the government.
Okay. How would you describe the situation right now?
The government is attacking Renamo.
Okay.
We can give you a perspective of where things started. Back in March 2011, the armed forces, the police, riot police, assaulted the headquarters of the party in Nampula. That is very close to where the leader of Renamo was living back in 2011. And then in October of 2012, the leader of Renamo, because now he was fearing for his own security, he moved from Nampula to Satungira, and that is in Beira region, in Sofala province.
Okay.
And the attacks continued, so that in April of 2013, this year.
All right, so Eduardo, are you reading this list off? Because I just want to hear really what you personally think started this. I don't want you to do a whole list. Yeah, exactly. I want you to really talk to us.
There is a sequence of events where Renamo infrastructure is being attacked. You know, the party headquarters in the provinces are being attacked. which led to the president to move to Satunjira, where he was living.
All right, so what you're saying is, in a nutshell, Renamo is coming under attack and the government started it. Let me just go across to Eric. Your publication is reporting on a lot of these, I don't know what to call them, skirmishes, clashes, conflict. How are you characterizing them in your paper, Verdad? Eric?
Well, we're calling them the beginning of the war. These are attacks.
Wow.
These involve guns, and they kill people, and they create a disturbance that we hadn't seen for over 20 years. So we are actually calling it the return to war. That's how we're covering it. We've got a whole live section on it, and the minute attacks occur, and we can confirm them, we put them online. We start social media discussions, and people are dying in these.
Okay, all right. We've frozen Eric just for a moment. We're unfreezing, but while we do that, May.
There's this interesting issue of what do we call this. Jessica, whose husband is from Mozambique, says that the current government is far from perfect, but dragging the country into a civil war is not the answer. She's declaring that this is a civil war.
Sure. Haru, what are you seeing? I'm getting 3 different versions of what's going on. I'm really interested to see how you're actually telling us in the international community what's going on in the ground.
Well, I'm in Sofala province. This is where pretty much most of the issues are taking place. Just on Saturday, we were on a convoy, and the army has to escort civilian motorists and trucks along a road. It's about 100 kilometers, but it's a dangerous road. So the first time we went on this particular journey from Mushungwe to the Save Bridge, there was no incidences. You had military in front of us and behind us. You had buses, trucks, people moving in this long line. It was a long line, and very few soldiers to protect us. Nothing happened, thankfully. Then on the way back, we told that there was an attack the day before, and someone, the government says Renamo fighters, had dug trenches along the highway, so cars couldn't pass. So along the escort, we had to go around the particular holes, I would say, and they were huge. Sure. They were quite big on the road, so you really can't pass. What happened was, the day before, people were ambushed, someone was killed. So we were going on this road, and we stopped, obviously, to film as journalists and see what's going on. Soldiers got out, and they tried to, I suppose, look out and see and make sure people were safe. And there were lots of people in this long line. Suddenly we hear gunshots coming from the bush. There's panic. And it's so much so that the soldiers ran in front of the civilians trying to get out first. You know, there was so much pandemonium, so much panic. We're wondering what is going on. Everyone's just scrambling for their lives. Basically what I'm saying is that a lot is going on in this part of the country. It's not being reported. And it's really frustrating for the locals, because they're the ones living through this. They're the ones who are dying, and no one seems to be hearing their story, and they feel no one really cares.
Right.
And it's interesting to find out what, from Eduardo, if I can pitch in on that.
Yeah,
I mean,
go ahead.
The government blames Renamo for all of this. What does Eduardo say about that? I mean, Eduardo, do you think that, I mean, people here on the ground feel Renamo fighters in the bush are responsible for some of the violence along this highway. Is this true? What is your position on that?
You see, this is the tactic the government have been using even during the civil war, that everything that happens, it was to blame Renamo. Renamo has been in that area for over 20 years. There's never been an incident at all in the Gorongosa area where the former guerrilla were living. There have been no report of any casualties during all these 20 years. But now that the government started attacking Renamo, of course, in some instance, Renamo has to respond. We cannot be attacked and remain, in silence. But I can tell you, I can assure you that most of the cases that are happening along the road, they are not to be blamed to Renamo. We have had several cases where people were attacked, and then it was confirmed that it was the government forces who attacked those people. So surely I cannot tell you what is happening on the ground, because I've not been there in the past months or so.
So you're not speaking from personal experience here. So if civilians are being killed, and Renamo's argument is not with civilians, it's with the government, why aren't there just soldiers being casualties? Why are there civilians being casualties? Eduardo, can you even answer that?
We have a confirmation, even from the media, of a situation where people were attacked, and it was confirmed that it was the armed forces who did attack civilians, not Renamo.
Right.
Even the vehicles that had been sacked along the road, some of them it was confirmed that it was the riot police who attacked those people, not Renamo
All right,
people.
but also it's difficult for you to say.
Renamo
right.
admitted on the voice of its leader, it was when they retaliated the attack they suffered, and then they retaliated attacked the police station, not civilians.
All right, but I have to say, unlike Haru, you're not actually on the ground and seeing this with your own eyes. Let me just get back to community. May?
On Facebook, Eduardo, people don't feel like the rebels, their tactics are to be supported. George from Facebook says, these rebels in Mozambique have got no genuine reasons to start killing and destroying people's property. Since 1992, if they have failed to convince people to vote for them, they should get out of politics. What are they doing in politics? And they're not compelling anybody to support them.
Eduardo?
Well, I don't know if the person who made that contribution knows Mozambique, whether they've been in Mozambique or he follows the politics of this country. Since 1992, this country has been in peace because Renamo ensured that there would be peace. Renamo committed itself to the peace agreement. But if you look at the peace agreement, this instrument has been violated several times by the government, and it has not been implemented fully. Remember, the peace in Mozambique, it was a result of a peace agreement, meaning that there was a lot of issues that were taken into account in order for us to secure peace. This has not been done. When we talk about the military aspects, the peace agreement stated that there should be a united army comprised by government forces and Renamo forces. This was not done.
So Eduardo, forgive me for one moment, because our international audience do not know the details of the 1992 Rome Peace Agreement, and let's not take them all the way through it because we only have a limited amount of time. But let me just share part of this conversation with Eric. It seems weird for me that after 21 years that this was come up as an issue. Would you say that in Mozambique for the last 20 years there's been unresolved issues just popping up now and again? I know that Eric's not here for a moment. I'll get back to him in a moment. But Eduardo, why after 21 years do you have these issues?
Exactly. This is what I was trying to elaborate, that there are issues on the peace agreement that were not resolved. One of the issues is related to the security of the leader of Renamo and the senior members of Renamo. It was agreed under the peace agreement that Renamo, after the peace, would keep a number of armed forces to ensure security of its leader and its senior member. This is in an agreement. It is written in the peace agreement.
All right, so Eduardo, I hear what you're saying about these particular points where you feel that the peace agreement hasn't been actually been adhered to. But let me bring back Eric in again. Eric, while I have you on the line here, do you feel, as somebody who lives in Mozambique, from Mozambique, that part of the peace agreement wasn't resolved for the last 20 years or so? Eric? Okay, I will keep trying. Yeah. Meanwhile, let me head back.
I think while Eric is not joining us, it is very important to clarify this.
Sure.
The security guards that are armed in Sofala province, those are not rebels. Those are known to the government because they are there. That is how it was agreed. The government knows them, the number, the weapons they are using. All this was agreed. And it was up to the government to incorporate those security into the police system so that they will all also be treated like police officer. And the government never did this.
So here I'm hearing like this is a situation, Eduardo, forgive me, this is a situation that needs negotiation desperately. I was just looking at an interview that President Armando Guebuza did with AFP. It was an exclusive interview, and he said that the way forward was not through conflict. Have a listen to this and see what you think.
Things that are happening are localized, and we know where it's happening. The solution is dialogue. it's not a military solution. You cannot have a military solution in any country when you have internal forces that do not agree on issues that they feel that are very sensitive.
So we've heard some of your grievances. How close are you to dialogue with the government?
Yeah, I agree that the best way is through dialogue, but we have been in dialogue for the past, I think, since May, and there's no results because the government is turning down all proposals that are being presented by Renamo. We have presented proposals to renew the electoral law, which has been one of Renamo's complaints since 1994. The government is saying it's not accepting any. We've been asking for the reform in the army. The government is turning down those proposals. Now we're talking even on the economic issues because everyone who belongs to Renamo are not given access to the resources, are not being given opportunity to share the natural resources that our country has.
All right, Eduardo, I want to share part of the conversation with Haru because I don't want to give you a party political speech through the whole of this program. Haru, I just want to ask you about these municipal elections coming up on Wednesday. You've been reporting on them. What's the impact of some of this conflict having on those municipal elections? Because Renamo aren't even going to get involved in those elections.
Well, people are concerned, people are worried. I think they're not really sure what's going to happen in terms of the Renamo factor and the tensions with the government. I mean, Renamo, to be honest, Eduardo, and I have to say this, it's really difficult to get any comment from Renamo. They hardly speak, especially here in Beira. When I tried speaking to Renamo officials, I was told we aren't allowed to talk to international media. So that creates confusion on the ground. People are panicking. They hearing rumors, and obviously in a case like this things would happen. There are rumors that Renamo might try and disrupt these elections. So what does that mean? So that could affect whether people turn out in huge numbers or not. I think Renamo needs to try and get its voice out more to the international community, to people on the ground, especially here in Sofala province. At the same time, the ruling party isn't innocent as well. And Eduardo, I do agree with you on some of those points. I think Frelimo also has made a lot of mistakes from what I'm seeing on the ground as well. They're also not talking to the media that openly, to the international media. It's hard for us to get comment here in Sofala province. So I think both sides do need to sit down. Dialogue is the way to go. But then Eduardo, I heard there was meant to be a meeting today in Maputo between Renamo and the government. And apparently Renamo didn't pitch, and it's the second time this has happened. So is Renamo really committed to peaceful dialogue, or is it just a ploy to stall things until you get your act together as a political party and come back into the political landscape? That's what people are asking. So can you answer that?
Eduardo?
No, Renamo is fully committed to dialogue, and we have been in dialogue with the government since May. But since we got to a point where there was no progress, we asked the government that we should bring in mediators to the table so that they would help us move. We identified Professor Lorenzo de Rosario, he's the Vice Chancellor of a Polytechnic University, and Don Dinesh Sengolan, who's an Anglican Archbishop. We identified those two people. And guess what? Those two people are Frelimo members. They are known, they identified themselves as such, they did not hide their party affiliation, but because we recognize their integrity, we invited them to be the facilitator of this dialogue, but the government is refusing to bring those people in.
Right,
and we say, if we don't have facilitators, there's no point of continuing discussion because we will not move.
Right, so you're doing nothing right now?
At this point, our position is that unless we have facilitators,
right,
unless we have mediators to this process, there's no point of us continuing discussing.
All right, so I'm going to try Eric again. Every time I say Eric, I lose him, so I'm going to try not to lose him this time. Eric, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, thank goodness for that. Really, we're hearing some backwards and forth with Eduardo, who's basically explaining, putting context to Renamo's strategy, what they're doing right now. But I'm seeing a lot of stuff on social media where people are just, we don't want war. You're treating like this situation as if you're going to war. What are you really hearing from the people of Mozambique and what they want?
Well, it's normal. Nobody wants war. You know,
right.
that shouldn't even be part of the discussion. In fact, I think, except for the leadership of this country, there is a common understanding that we don't want war. Why do I say that? And I have to say this because what Namburete was saying, a lot of it is right, really, from the point of the media and what we've been covering. The government is playing an agenda. They're not inviting anybody in. For example, the fact that they don't sit in a discussion like this to put their points of view in an uncontrolled manner, it's part of that example. They've refused to sit on any debate, on any kind of direct
So you've seen them nowhere? You've seen the government nowhere, no discussion at any point in Mozambique?
No, not at all, except for the publicly controlled media, where they placed editorials and commentators. They refuse to talk with the independent media. They haven't spoken to us because we will ask them the hard questions. And in fact, this seems to be the unveiling of a plot that's been really well written. You know, it started with these small provocations to the leader of Renamo, of course. You know, the leader of Renamo is an independent Mozambican individual. He can live in any part of the country. What is not justified, and we never got answers to, is why the government started buying heavy equipment, armory, shipping containers of armed men to the center region of the country, while every Monday it was discussing with the Renamo on this case of the parity and the election process, between them to discuss and negotiate. What I'm saying is that there's been a preparation for this process, and because it hasn't been covered enough, when you see it, the people who are commenting, the people who are the media that's putting it out there sees a very well-written plot and says, well, Renamo, who has actually really bad PR, can't put up their cases there.
So, Eric, what do you have as evidence that this might be a plot, a plan by Frelimo?
This is what he's saying. We've been covering for a while, for example, this I mean, this is a poor country, you know, the third bottom country in HDI, and next thing you know, we're buying extensive armory since April. You know, we've been reporting, citizens have been showing that we've been spending money on weapons and guns and unnecessarily. And then this shipping all throughout 6 months of heavy groups of people to the region, the center region of the country where the Renamo stronghold was something that we never got answers to. We said, why is this happening? Why is this tension being built? Because when you put two elements and two people with guns, something is bound to happen. Like most people say on our stream, they say, look, the old man, referring to Renamo's leader, was there in peace and by himself. You know, why did we go and provoke him? So this is just to tell you that we should look into this with the clear points and facts of what's been happening. I'm not trying to put sides onto it.
All right, so Eric, I'm going to come back to you. I want to show some of our audience some of the social media that we've been seeing, and we first covered this story a few weeks ago on the stream. This is No to War. This is a Facebook page, and then also we covered the actual story first of all on October the 25th with a stream extra, Mozambique wants peace, and you can see young people and Mozambicans here holding up their signs for peace, saying how important it is. Eric Cherez, he's a publisher of Verdad, he's an activist as well. He's saying he's already reporting it as war. You heard Haru talking about some of the fighting that she heard, and then also Eduardo from the opposition party saying that right now there is no dialogue whatsoever. What is our online community saying, just to wrap up this part of the main show?
Yes. Rui on Facebook is saying Mozambican civil society are directing their anger solely at the president, even though he is one part of the institution and it's the entire state that's falling apart.
This is a complex situation, a complex story. We will take it to the post show. There's so much more to talk about at stream.aljazeera.com. Let me tell you about the next program. Just before we do that, more than 19 million domestic workers in Latin America could soon have their rights protected by the law. What can the rest of the world learn from these advances? Stay with us. The post show is next though at stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks for watching. See you online. Hello again, this is the Streams online post show. We're talking about Mozambique and what should be done to prevent violence between government forces and former rebels. So let's get right back to that conversation. May, I'm going to dip back into the online community and see what they're having to say. A big subject is about natural resources in Mozambique. When I was in Mozambique, there was nothing. There were just NGOs all over the place. No natural resources. But now
they're pointing to the fact, yes, they're pointing to the fact that they're discovering all these natural resources and how that's tied to the economic boom and possibly the instability.
Sure.
So from Thiago on Facebook, he says, now that there is a boom of natural resources, the priority for everyone in power is to make money, not to serve the country. Eventually, the ones excluded from the position will try and destabilize the system to be in power, and I believe he's talking about the opposition groups here. Stephanie here, she relates this to this issue that we see now of the political turmoil because everybody's hedging for that economic stake. She says the country can literally not afford to portray any sense of insecurity or instability, and she even expounded on this subject through a video comment. So let's watch.
In the case of its government and its economy, very heavily dependent on international donors and on investors who could potentially make Mozambique the world's third largest exporter of liquefied natural gas. And it's concerning that this instability could potentially affect that, and we see with announcements by Rio Tinto that they're withdrawing expats' families from the country, and it does raise questions whether this instability could potentially damage other future investments.
So Haru, I was watching one of your most recent reports talking about the possible implications to tourism, to investment in Mozambique. What were people telling you as you were putting that report together?
People are worried. I think people don't really know which way the country is going to go. I mean, all people really don't want war, the actual person on the ground, but what they're seeing is of concern. And again, I stress this. I mean, I've been here for a while now, and I mean, we've been shot at, we've been traveling in convoys escorted by the military, we've seen villages that have been abandoned, we've seen things happening here that they aren't getting out in the media for whatever reason, and the people here feel frustrated about it. They don't feel their leaders are that committed to really finding a solution to whatever the problem is. I think in all these debates and discussions, we mustn't forget the people on the ground. They're the ones who are really affected at the end of the day. Politicians will either leave the country, go overseas, stay in their big houses in the capital city or elsewhere, but it's the woman in the village with her children who has to run every time something happens. That's who we should be concerned about. And how can this crisis or this problem be resolved without any more bloodshed? From what I'm seeing, I mean, I'll tell you, Femi, I'm worried. I'm really worried, and I'm worried because there doesn't seem to be much attention on this crisis. And hearing Eduardo, hearing Alex, I think we need to be realistic. The world has to move on from just talking about this problem to finding concrete solutions. What those solutions are, I really don't know. Perhaps Alex and Eduardo can come in and give some kind of opinion on what's going on. How can we actually end this problem as an international community, as people living in Mozambique? What is the way forward, really?
So Eric, you gave us a plot towards the end of the show, and you felt that Frelimo was planning something in the way of a military push against Renano. What about the way forward, where we are right now? What would you do? Okay. So Eric, I know you're rubbing your brow. It's a big question, I know.
No. It's just it's kind of frustrating because it's almost like people are sitting at the frost and really not digging deeper and finding out the source of this problem. Usually, when people want me to give a direct link of what's going on, I say, look, this is the resource curse in action. You know. But in order to do that, you need to set up and put up the plot. We found gas. It's going to be massive. The levels of corruption in this country are huge. We've got a government that's been sitting in power and wants to hold power at any cost, even if that means starting a war, pushing a provocation here. They've been setting up a whole bunch of scenarios in order to justify that sort of things. But when you look, really, it's just been happening internally, and it's very hard when you try to put it out there and people try to get the small, easy story, which is Renano the bad guys, They're starting the war. So let's hope that we get Zimbabwe and Africa to come annihilate them, and that's it, you know.
Okay, I'm losing you a little bit, Eric, but I understand the point that you're making. Let me just jump back to Eduardo here and be very candid, Eduardo. It's part of what Renamo is doing because you feel like you want a bigger share of the natural resources, if you're very honest about it?
No, that's not the point.
Right.
During the civil war, when Renamo was fighting for democracy, there was no oil, there was no gas. At least this was not publicly known. So that is not the issue. That's not the issue. The issue is that we want to live in a country where everyone can feel that owns this country, that can be able to do whatever he feels like doing within the constitutional framework. But what is happening now is that only those who are affiliated to the ruling party are entitled to participate in whatever this country can offer us. So it's not an issue of Renamo members. You can look at what happened in Beira. Renamo was not there. It was another party, MDM, that the government, because of fear of losing the elections there, they went there and attacked and disrupted their rally and so on. So it's not an issue that Renamo is complaining or is fighting for its own benefit. The concern of Renamo is that we want to establish a truly democratic state in Mozambique.
I understand the point that you're making, Eduardo. We're just very briefly, because I only have so much time to do this in, because we're almost at the end of this program, is that if that's really what you're pushing for, why step out of the municipal elections? Why take yourself out of the framework? Because you were already the strongest opposition party, and now you're not going to have any candidates running on Wednesday.
Because this whole thing of municipal election is just a joke, I can tell you. Because with the current electoral law, Frelimo will only lose elections in a place where they want to lose. If they want to win everywhere, they can win because they control the process. They supply the machinery, the computers that will be used during the elections. They have all the staff running this election. So you can't really compete with someone who has control over the electoral process. Then we decided, look, if this is the rule of the game, then for us it doesn't make sense to enter a game where you know.
So you're not going to play the game. So what will you do instead?
Well, we are asking. That's why we are sitting on the table to discuss and force the government to agree that this is not democracy.
And how will you force the government, Eduardo? How are you going to force the government?
Well, I think we are insisting in talking. Now that I'm talking to you, I believe I'm talking to the whole world through Al Jazeera.
Sure.
They will hear our point. They will press the government. They will make pressure to the government because this government still relies somehow on the donor money, and the donors can help demand the government more openness, more democratic institutions. Then we are also asking the government to accept that facilitators come into the table so that we can make progress in our discussion. If there's nothing to hide, why the government is not accepting an independent facilitator? And we made it even easier for them. We chose 2 members from their own ruling party.
Sure.
Why they are afraid of bringing them into the table? We did not bring anyone from Renamo. The facilitators were identified are from Frelimo, so there's nothing to fear. If they want a truly serious discussion, then they should allow those people to come in. So we even went further to say, if you don't agree with those 2, please, you can identify other facilitators as long as we have someone who can mediate, because as we are now, we're not making any progress because we're just talking, but at the end of the day, people outside the room, they don't know what is happening.
All right, so right now, there's no dialogue, there's no negotiations, there's no talking, there's nothing. Nothing's happening.
Until the government accepts to bring in facilitators, we are not willing to go back to the negotiation.
To be at the talking table. Okay. Eric, I feel a deep sigh inside of me. So for you, for your publication, you're still basically war reporting. How far do you feel this might go? I mean, I don't want to say the C word, but I don't know. Should I be thinking civil war?
Yeah, you should. You know, at the end of the day, what we're starting to get is a sense of a lot of opportunism will come out. Guns run uncontrollably here. You know, it's a poor country, therefore we got the police that rents out their guns, so it becomes very simple for an individual to just get their guns rented from the police and make an attack on the end of the day. We are running to a situation of losing control, which is really the problem for citizens like me that no longer can travel on the road to go to a beach and spend some time there with our families, because you know, everybody is quick to jump that says that Renamo has been attacking this road, but there's been incidents where government people, in fact the army, has dressed up as Renamo and they've attacked cars, and unfortunately they were caught. We can't really tell who's attacking, you know.
And this is difficult for me as well, because also I can't tell, I can't verify those what you're saying as well, so I only have your word for it. So so you are thinking you're heading to civil war? I'm wrapping up right now, Eric, so I'm just asking you just a final word here. You're thinking that's where you're going? Well, if we don't have the conversation between Renamo and government, we are actually heading there. Conversation needs to happen. They need to sit and actively talk. You know, they've been talking for 25 rounds, getting nowhere. So, like Namuret has been saying, we need to have third parties listening in and starting to say what's failing. All right, I hear that. Media, I hear the talking needs to happen. I hear no talking whatsoever. Eric, thank you, and thank you for bearing with us for our technical difficulties there. Haru, what do you make of what you've been hearing in the last 35 minutes or so?
I agree with a lot of things. I think every side has a point. Renamo, Frelimo, the other opposition parties like MDM as well. Everyone has a point. I think dialogue is the way to go. I think the media needs to get the story out more. I think the more the world knows about what's going on, the better it will be for people in Mozambique. Unfortunately, it's not happening, and things will happen quietly without being seen. People killed, things getting out of control in Mozambique, and the world won't even know. Some of them won't even care. I think we need to be worried and find a strategy and find a way forward.
Al Jazeera correspondent Haru Matassa, she is in Beira in Mozambique right now. She called this the forgotten crisis, but with Haru out there in the field, it won't be forgotten in Al Jazeera English. Meanwhile, back at our community, I'll give you the last word, May.
Most people are pressing for dialogue, but above all, they just want peace. Anna on Twitter says, people want real democracy, freedom of expression, and the opportunity to continue developing. They don't want people to keep dying. And lastly, Ilyasu says, the truth is, no matter how long it takes to dialogue, no matter the problems of peace, conflict will never be the solution.
Do you know what I really loved about the online community today is they know this subject so well. They knew all the players, they knew the history of Mozambique. So it was really fascinating hearing their comments, and they were very pointed as well.
Yeah, they took us back. They pressed us to do our research.
So, the conversation's not over yet. You can go to stream.aljazeera.com, comment on today's story, our web extras, and also you can tweet us at #AJStream. Thank you to Eduardo Nambarete, Eric Sherez, and Haru Matassa. On the next show, more than 19 million domestic workers in Latin America could soon have their rights protected by the law. So what can the rest of the world learn from these advances? Good question for the next AJ Stream. Until then, I'll be online with May. Thanks for watching. Take care.